Okay. Session 3. FBAs. Functional Behavior Assessments. And actually, I have to do that. Okay, so it says to review your RBT Session 2 assessments. We're not going to do that, obviously, because that's what we would normally be doing. So we're cheating a little bit.
Can you re-email the even?
Yeah.
One? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, critical questions to determine when to intervene with behavior. Hold on a second. Can I cheat and see if that's still part of 2? No, it's not. Okay.
Is it?
I probably should have stayed back, but that's okay. No, this is part of 3. Okay. So these are the questions to see if we should, okay. Critical questions to determine when to intervene with the behavior. I don't need it to do that. Okay, is the behavior dangerous to the student or others? So, safety is number 1. Is the behavior similar in frequency to that of peers? So, are they blending in well enough? Are they doing something more than they should or less than they should? Is the behavior age appropriate or likely to be transient? So, a 12-year-old that likes to play with Barney dolls, right? It's not age appropriate. It's not socially appropriate. Is the behavior due to skill deficits in other areas? Are they showing this problem behavior because they don't understand how to do the math? Do they need more help with their academics? Is the behavior impeding the educational progress of the student or peers? So in the classroom, is it affecting other people? Is the behavior preventing the student from participating in the least restrictive environments? The goal is for them to be inside. Here we go then. The goal is for them to be included with their typical peers as much as possible. Well, if they have aggressive behaviors or shouting out, or they're just non-compliant, or they can't sit in their desk or sit on the carpet, is that preventing them from being able to be included in that environment? And do those affected by the behavior agree that it is a problem? If the parents don't think that it's a problem, then there's a problem. You cannot do anything if the parents don't agree. Everybody has to agree that this needs to be changed, because if one person doesn't agree, then they're not going to follow through with the behavior plan, and that won't work. What does at risk look like? So, these behaviors are not going to be, they're not harmful or violent, but they are an indicator that new behaviors need to be taught. So, disruptive in groups, they talk out during instruction, unprepared for tasks, they talk back to adults, uses inappropriate language, they're tardy for school, class, or work, they're defiant towards authority, refuses to do work, difficulty taking turns, refuses to share, they're out of their seat, they're picking on peers, they may have low academic achievement. These are the at-risk because if they don't learn as a kid on how to use appropriate language, how to follow the classroom rules and norms, as they get older, there will be consequences. And as there are consequences, then your aggressive behaviors will start to show. So you have to get it at an early age. In general, poor peer relationships, low academic achievement, difficulty adjusting to school environment, chaotic home environment, and low self-esteem. So, we need to catch them before they fall. At-risk or harmful behaviors, the severity and stability. Quick identification is more likely to result in long-term success. Substance abuse and school dropouts. So if we prevent these things from happening, then we can prevent them from starting and using drugs and dropping out of school. So here is the alternative school, and he's holding out a kid. We can't afford to save this one, but don't worry, someone will catch him. Someone will also take care of him. Here is the welfare system truck, the judicial system truck, and the gangs. So we can't help him, but it's okay. One of these guys will take care of him. And it's true. They're either going to be in the welfare system, in jail, or part of a gang, because that's the only one that has shown them family and love. Oops, hold on a second. So the more severe the behavior, the more stable it is across time and settings. More severe also means more risk for worse outcomes. Interventions are cheaper and work better when they're done early than when they're done later. Many children do not outgrow problem behaviors, they grow into them. So even if at-risk behavior does not become worse, these students are at an increased risk for substance abuse and dropouts. So an FBA examines variables that surround behavioral responses to determine the function of behavior. So we need to figure out why they do what they do. So it's the relationship between a person's behavior and his or her environment. Interventions are designed to address the function of behavior by teaching new behaviors that serve the same function. So these are the replacement behaviors. Treatment strategies are selected based on the function of behavior, not the form, not what it looks like, but why they're doing it. They can want attention in many different ways. They can want attention by taking things from others. They can want attention from screaming. They can want attention by hitting, property destruction. So we don't care what it looks like, but why they want it, why they're doing it. Okay, so here's an indirect functional behavior assessment. So there's the records review, which is looking at everything that we have on, basically on our rain tree is their medical background. So all their assessments, their speech assessments that they've gotten either here or from somewhere else, their occupational assessments, their assessments that got them diagnosed with autism. Any kind of assessments I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at if they're in school, how many days they were absent. I'm going to look at their grades. I'm going to look at everything that is a record of who this person is on paper. And it's starting to go in. Okay, then we have interviews. So there are a few different kinds of interviews. So here's one of them that we use, the ABIS. I give, for all of my assessments that I do, I give them an ABIS and I give an SSIS. So the ABIS is, it goes through, it's a rating scale, and it goes through from communication, it's every part of their life, functional academics, home living, safety, leisure, self-care, self-direction, social, and then if they're older, the work. If they're missing work or going to work. There's one more, community use. So it's all aspects of their lives. And then the SSIS is their social skills and problem behaviors. And it's another rating scale. So it's an interview with their parents. For our kiddo, I had the teachers and his parents fill that out, so I could get both opinions to see what was going on and which ones were the same, which ones were different. And then scientific literature review. So I'm going to use, like for our VB map first, for example, I'm going to use those comparisons, like what's the norm, what should I be looking for, what's developmentally appropriate for a kid this age. Let's see what this does. Medline Plus. Why is it telling me to go to Medline Plus? Never been over here. Well, check out Medline Plus. There must be some good stuff. Must have scientific literature. Okay. The next one, descriptive or direct functional behavior assessment. So we are informal observations. So I'll just go and be a fly on the wall. This is what you guys are doing when you are going and sitting in with the kids when they're getting speech or occupational therapy. You're there. Well, you might be.
I am too.
You are too?
Yeah.
So you're doing observations. You're writing down what you're seeing, kind of like you're writing a little story, right? You're writing down what they're doing, their interactions, what might have triggered something. So you're not only doing your observations, but you are also putting in any data into the programming book because it's taken out of our data taking, and it is a speech and OT goal that's in their program because they gave it to us, so we might as well take the data since they wrote the goals. So we'll take the data for them. They're doing the work, we'll take the data. So that way we can help them out too because they can't work. It's hard for them to work because their ABA strengths aren't really there. So they come to us for behavior. Like, what do I do? Like, how am I supposed to teach them and not get them climbing on the table? Well, here, this is what we'll do. And you know what? Since we're here, we'll help you out. We'll take some data for you. And that way we can see what they're working on, and then we can use it in our sessions too. Determine the measurement system. So are we going to see how many times they're doing it, or do we want to see how long they're doing it? Or do we want to see how hard they're hitting the ball or how far they're kicking the ball? So you have to look at what kind of measurement are you going to use? What exactly are we looking for? And then ABC observations are antecedent, behavior, consequence.
Hello, my name is Tina Patterson and I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. Today, I want to talk to you about one of the most important factors for getting school officials to give your child services that they need to improve in the schools. What I have found over 18 years is that the single most important factor that will help school officials provide interventions and services that your child needs is data. Now, it's not as big as it sounds. It really is simply tracking social skills and problem behaviors. Now, the document I would recommend that you use for tracking is called an ABC form. The document on your screen shows ABCs in different columns. Now, the term ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Now, those terms are important because the school officials will know that you need to know what you're talking about with that language. The first three columns on the form are antecedents. In other words, variables that come before a behavior.
I changed
next
ours.
column is the
I whited
behavior
it out.
column.
So
If you
it's
push
not
back,
the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, the bathroom, the hallway. And I edited it out to like speech,
This is followed by
OT,
the
hallway,
time column,
therapy, and
which
then
talks about
I
beginning and
specifically
ending
put like
time of any behavior, how
play,
long it occurs, and it tells us the difference between
therapy,
two behaviors.
other,
Last column are
and then so
consequences,
I whited these
which
out and
simply
changed
mean
it for
any environmental variable
our setting,
that follows a problem behavior.
rather
Now
than
let's
trying
take
to
a
make
look
all
at
these little
completed
boxes.
ABC form. ABC form. Now remember, you can personalize this for your own kiddo. You'll notice that there are codes circled in every column that represent what is happening in the moment. Look on line 1. This child is demonstrating a problem behavior in the kitchen during mealtime following a task request. They demonstrated task refusal, and the time was 7:30 a.m. to 7:35 a.m., and the parent gave a verbal correction. See how easy that is? So, why am I recommending an ABC form? Well, because it collects so many different variables that are important to establishing what your child is doing over time. Now, you can do this, but how many of them do you need? Well, you'll probably need one for every day, at least for 30 days. Bring this information with you to meetings with the school officials and show them that you have been diligently taking data. And when you are able to show that the data means something over time, the interventions from schools will follow. Now, if you would like a copy of an ABC form, please send me an email to Tina Patterson, bcba@gmail.com. And please be sure to like me on Facebook, Tina Patterson, BCBA. There are a few gold nuggets on there for you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to look for our next video.
That's the lady that wrote our stuff. Okay. Beep, 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 beep. Graph behavior data. So when you guys give me your, as long as you take data, then I can, let's see if we have it. Or not. Try and show you a graph, but I don't see it in his binder. Well, oh well. Can't show you. Just kidding. We'll get to that after I go through this. Remind me, binders. Remind me. Okay, analyze behavior data. So after you guys take the data, I put it into a graph. I analyze it and tell you, okay, what's going on at this time. And then we start to look at weather, if it's always on a Monday, if it's always on a Friday, if it's always with a certain person, if it's always in a certain room, is it always during a certain activity. We can look at that and see, and then we can figure out how can we change it a little bit so that maybe that work is too hard. What can we do to make it more fun? Because we still need him to do the work. He still has to learn how to match for whatever. What can we do so that it's easier or more fun for him to do? Pick their favorite thing, like dinosaurs or whatever, for God's sakes. Okay. Functional analysis, experimental functional behavior assessment, FBA. We don't really do this. We don't have the environment to do this, but the antecedents and consequences are manipulated in a controlled manner in an attempt to isolate their effects on behavior. So, I've done this a few times. It is basically an empty room with a window, one-way window, so people can see outside. So there's two of us. One person is inside doing the work. The other person's outside taking the data. So everything is controlled. And well, it happens. And we have a link. It'll be a link. Okay, hold on. So there's 4 functions or conditions. You have your attention, positive reinforcement, escape, which is negative reinforcement, alone, automatic reinforcement, so there's just your sensory stuff, and then your play condition, which is the control setting. So it's a science experiment at its finest. So in the attention function condition, it's just you and the child, and you are doing something. You guys would never really be doing this, but this is what it looks like. So you are busy doing something. You read a book, play on your phone, do something on your computer. You're busy. They act out for attention, and you stop what you're doing and you give them attention. So you're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you're treating it, because you want to feed into the problem. So they throw a fit, they hit you, you pay attention to them. 30 seconds. Then you go back to your work. And every time it does, you do it for this, each condition is 10 minutes long. Then it's the end. And then you pick another condition. So you do this for several days. For each one is 10 minutes long. So you pick attention. It's random pick. You don't know what you're picking. And usually you switch person. So you do for 10 minutes and then you switch and the other person does 10 minutes. The escape. You are asking them to do work. The minute they show any problem behavior, take the work away for 30 seconds. Then present the work. They have a problem behavior, take it away. So you are doing completely opposite. The alone condition is alone. Nobody's in there but the kid with nothing else. What is he going to do for 10 minutes? Is he going to stim? Is he going to self-aggress? Is he going to find little pieces of anything on the carpet? Are they going to try to escape? You'd be surprised what kids can do for 10 minutes in an empty room. It's maybe they'll show us with this eye. And then 4 is play, the control. So you're giving them attention. There's no work. You're playing with them. It's so much fun. So you shouldn't see any behaviors in that one. That one's the fun one. There's no behaviors. And
this session deals with functional analysis of behavior, the experimental manipulation of contingencies. This is part of functional behavioral assessment, although very often the two terms functional analysis and functional assessment are used interchangeably. They are not the same thing. It's important to know that. A functional analysis of behavior includes an experimental manipulation, whereas a functional assessment includes usually interviews, direct observation in natural environments, and a general ABC analysis. In the experimental manipulation, we go a step further. Basically, we're saying, if it's not working, can I go back on the value? No, we need to do a functional analysis. The functional analysis of behavior is a specific kind of functional assessment and is used to determine the function of the behavior, that is, to discover which factors maintain the behavior in question. Strategies include the manipulation of contingencies or experimentation and direct observation. The basic behavioral functions can be that the behavior produces attention or access to toys and desired activities. Basically, the behavior produces a positive reinforcer. Or the behavior allows the person to avoid or escape from demands. And basically, the behavior produces negative reinforcement. Or the behavior occurs because of sensory consequences, and so it is exposed to automatic reinforcement. In all of these three cases, we see usually quite high frequency behaviors because they've all been reinforced through various ways. So when we use a systematic experimental manipulation of contingencies to define and to find out which of these functions the behavior serves, we might design several different situations or contingencies and carefully observe how the behavior changes. And then we repeat the experiment a number of times so that we can be sure it wasn't just an accidental observation. This procedure, while it might seem as if it takes a bit of time up front, it avoids time being wasted on a try and hope intervention. So the direct observation involves directly observing the behavior and then analyzing the contingencies that have led to that behavior, the antecedent and the consequences. Let's just say take thumb sucking as a problem behavior. It is a problem because of potential damage to the gum and teeth, and also because of potential damage to tissues on the thumb and the finger. It also can cause social stigma in older children and adults who suck their thumb. So, if you saw somebody sucking their thumb during a committee meeting, you would certainly have some thoughts about that, and it would cause social stigma for that person. So, thumb sucking, while it might not be considered a big problem in babies, it does eventually cause a problem. It might also lead to the avoidance of tasks or social situations. So in order to run some functional tests, we need to clearly define the target behavior and the dimensions to be mentioned, dimensions on which it is to be measured. For instance, frequency or duration or whatever other dimensions. For review of the dimensions of behavior, you need to go back to the behavior measurement lectures. Then we design the experimental manipulations or tests that manipulate different environmental events to see how the behavior changes under those circumstances. And then we observe directly and systematically the behavior and reassess and repeat the tests. So let's have a functional analysis of thumb sucking in 4 conditions. The first condition will be alone. The alone condition, there's no stimulation provided, there's no social interaction provided. This condition will check whether the behavior is reinforced through automatic reinforcement. The second situation will be a demand condition. There will be a suitable demand will be placed on the person, not too much, but just a suitable demand, and we'll see if the behavior is used to avoid the demand to avoid the problem, the demand. In which case, if that behavior is used has the function of avoiding the demand, basically, we can assume that there's negative reinforcement in play. The next situation will be social attention. The child will be reprimanded when he's sucking his thumb, and basically, if that increases the thumb sucking behavior, we can assume that the positive reinforcement is in place. And then we will have an enriched situation where there's lots of stimulation and where other behaviors will be reinforced, the non-thumb sucking behaviors, which gives us an indication then if this behavior does not occur in this situation, then it gives us an inroad into designing the intervention. We will also graph the behavior. This is a hypothetical graph. So whenever you're going to see these video clips in just a moment, you need to think about what behavioral dimension will you measure and how will you measure it, and then take some data because you'll be asked to draw this graph afterwards. You can replay the videos as you need to. So the functional analysis of thumb sucking, 4 conditions. The first condition. I will show you all the alone conditions in consecutive order, although of course they weren't all taken in consecutive order. So you need to imagine that these are taken at various times of the day or at various days. You want to repeat the condition in a different situation. Third observation. Of course, as you imagine, it is really important that you assess the behavior, the severity of the behavior before you expose anybody to the alone condition or any of the experimental conditions. If, for instance, the behavior is a severe self-injurious behavior, you might not be able to allow for the alone condition to be observed like this. In our case here, we have a behavior that doesn't actually cause immediate danger to the child or anybody else, so we were able to run the condition a number of times. Here we have the demand condition. The child is given a task to complete, and we'll observe whether the behavior, the problem behavior, has a function of avoiding the demand and thereby being negatively reinforced. And the third time the demand condition is put in place. Then we'll have a condition where there's social attention for the inappropriate behavior. So basically, we're assessing whether the inappropriate behavior is functions functions with a positive reinforcer. And finally, we have the enriched situation. We didn't run a third negative reinforcement condition. We ran the enriched condition instead. And we run another enriched situation. So that was the functional analysis setups, the experimental manipulations that we produced. I want you to stop the video now and draw the graph for your observations. You can of course go back to the video clips and review them to see whether you have decided on the right dimension of the behavior. I want you just to practice drawing a graph. So what are the conclusions of the functional analysis? Write down the conclusions from your graph. Write down the functions. What is a function? What are the functions of this thumb-sucking behavior in this young child? And then consequently, what are the recommendations for interventions? So again, pause the video now and write those down for yourself. The functions of behavior based on the functional analysis. Based on this functional analysis, it is likely that the thumb sucking was a function of automatic reinforcement. It would need to identify if the sensation of the thumb or the mouth are the key function. That we haven't done that yet, because if you can find out whether it is the actual feeling on the thumb or the feeling in the mouth, it would, depending on which one it is, it would obviously create a different intervention. We also saw that thumb sucking may be also a function of positive reinforcement. When they were getting, there was a bit of that, not much, but there was a bit of that. So it might be that some of the attention given to the thumb sucking might have actually reinforced that behavior. Based on the functional analysis, it is likely that the thumb sucking was not a function of demand avoidance. It's quite clear that when there was demands, when asked of the child, he was not engaging in the problem behavior at all. In fact, the demands may even function as a reinforcer for the absence of thumb sucking. You could see he really enjoyed that, playing and having some demands placed on him. He enjoyed that. So the implications for interventions would be that behaviors that are maintained by automatic reinforcement are difficult to change because it is difficult to remove the automatic reinforcer. So the intervention should be based on reinforcement of alternative or other behaviors or competing responses. Interventions could include alternative sensory stimulation, such as the use of a teething toy when he's on his own. Behaviors that are maintained by positive reinforcers, such as social attentions, are addressed by removing the positive reinforcer from the problem behavior. So you would maybe instruct the mother to ignore the problem behavior rather than reinforcing it. So the intervention should be based on differential reinforcement of alternative or other behavior and extinction of the problem behavior. The outcome of the functional analysis would be that we have operational description of the undesired behavior. We have the prediction of times and situations of the undesirable behaviors. We have a definition of the functions and an identification of the variables that maintain the undesirable behavior. Ultimately, the objectives of the functional analysis are not to define or eliminate. They are to understand the structure and function of the behavior and to guide the intervention, to teach effective alternatives. So the functional analysis has an educative function. One important point to remember when we do a functional assessment or a functional analysis is that topographically similar behaviors can serve different functions. So even when the behaviors look very, very similar, they may not have the same function. Also, topographically different behaviors can serve the same or similar functions. So even behaviors that look very, very different might still serve the same function. Behaviors can serve more than one function. That is also important. We've seen it in the example here that the behavior may very well serve two functions. Therefore, not all topographically similar behaviors will respond to the same intervention techniques. So a functional analysis will guide us so that we design our interventions to address the function of the behavior, not necessarily the topography. The topography can be quite irrelevant in the functional analysis. We are looking at the function of the behavior, and of course we are addressing the topography if the topography means that there's harm comes to the person in question. So Behaviors can have one or a combination of function, and ultimately function-based intervention require a careful look at curricular requirements, basic behavior management, and availability of non-contingent reinforcement. The references, some references to this presentation, and especially interesting to see Brian Iwata talking himself in the YouTube videos, so feel free to explore.